Volunteering is a great way to give back to the community. But did you know that community service can possibly help your student pay for college? In today's video, I want to explain to you how your student can use their community service to their advantage in order to knock off thousands of dollars from the college bill, as well as what to do if your student perhaps has not had a lot of community service experience. Now, make sure you hit subscribe because this is just one of many strategies that we are sharing every single week to help your family get your student through college completely debt-free. Hey there, my name is Jocelyn Pearson, founder of the Scholarship System, where we redefine paying for college to help families build strong financial futures rather than ones where there are decades of student loan debt. Now, scholarships, this is my bread and butter. In fact, I secured 6 figures to pay for my education and graduate debt-free, and we've surpassed $10 million that our families have secured. So we know what we're talking about when it comes to scholarships, so I can't wait to get into this. Now, community service is time contributed to a nonprofit or a public service organization. It can also actually be giving back in an unofficial way. So it doesn't always have to be through an official organization, but it could be something that's consistently done maybe every single week that is helpful, it's not done for money, and it's done out of the kindness of our heart. Now, community service doesn't necessarily guarantee money, but there are multiple ways that it can be used to increase your chances of getting scholarship dollars. So this is typically advantageous for most students. Now, the neat thing about this is it not only can help increase the chances of getting money, but it can also increase their chances of getting into a school in the first place. So there really are a lot of benefits here. Now, why do schools and organizations care about community service? Well, they like to see that a student is passionate about something, that they're contributing to something bigger than them. It also shows life skills, time management, leadership. I'll explain more about the benefits in just a little bit. But overall, we want to focus on 2 main ways that community service can help a student. So the first is that it can simply make them eligible for certain scholarships. I'll explain the different types in just a little bit. And secondly is that even if scholarships don't require community service specifically, it can still make them more competitive and increase their chances of receiving the money. Now, lastly, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, man, my student really doesn't have many hours of community service, they haven't done much, I'm also going to address that at the end of this video. So first, let's talk about just making students eligible. So there are many examples where scholarships focus on community service and make it an actual requirement. So students with a strong history of service are eligible to apply, and they have a significant chance of winning the money from that organization. For example, the DAV scholarship for students, this requires at least 100 hours of community service that is related to a veteran or VA medical centers. So here's an example where it's very clean cut. A student needs a certain amount of hours in order to apply for that scholarship. Now, again, there are so many scholarships beyond even community service. This is just one example. So if you're interested in learning where to find these legitimate scholarships with less competition, make sure you register for my free scholarship training. I'm going to link to that in the description below, but that's where you can learn where to find not just community-based scholarships, but also ones that have nothing to do with service. Now, there are also scholarships where they consider volunteer hours. That's a piece of the pie, but they're also considering other criteria like maybe SAT or ACT scores, GPA, class ranking, other things along with the hours. And this can be nice for students that don't have a lot of community service, but they're competitive in other areas, so they can kind of combine it to really sell themselves to the committee. So the thing here is that you want to know what the requirements are for a scholarship, which you can also shoot for if you have a scholarship in your sight in the future. Now, lastly, there are also scholarships, private scholarships, that are given by an organization that requires volunteering with them. So for example, actually, as a senior in high school, I received a scholarship from Ronald McDonald House. This was somewhere that I volunteered, and they did give out money as well, which was just a great perk for something I was already really passionate about. So they required recipients of their scholarship to be volunteers at their organization. Now, comment below, what organizations does your student volunteer for? Or if they don't volunteer, what is something that they're passionate about that you think maybe they could do as community service? Let me know in the comments. Read through the comments also to see what ideas we've all come up with. Okay, so there's 3 different main areas of types of scholarships that a student can be eligible for if they have community service. But now let's go ahead and turn focus on how it can not just make them eligible, but how it can make them competitive. So like I mentioned, committees want to see students who have certain skill sets to indicate future success: leadership, time management, the ability to focus, etc. Now, inside our course, the scholarship system, I go in full detail of what committees are looking for, including having a full cheat sheet of buzzwords that students can use. If you want to learn more about that, you can find the link in the description. But overall, volunteering can show so many skill sets that can not only help a student sell themselves for a scholarship that's based on community service, but it can also help them sell themselves to colleges and other committees for private scholarships. So by volunteering, even if they're not applying to a service-based scholarship, it still can give them a story to tell, involvements to list. There's so many other things that can be used to make them more competitive besides just simply checking a box and saying, yes, I do community service. So this is why it's advantageous beyond just making them eligible for certain scholarships as far as their requirements. Now, I mentioned it can help them in their essay. I actually have an amazing video here on YouTube on 7 essay ideas to help your student win money. I will link to that in the description as well. Make sure you check that out afterwards. It might give some ideas. Now, lastly, having that community service also shows a student is well-rounded, which is something that committees and universities look for as well. So I think that it's clear that if your student has community service, it can be advantageous in many ways. Now, let's turn focus to those who have students that have maybe little service hours or little experience with this, or maybe even none. What can they do? The good news is that volunteering doesn't have to be a huge time commitment. It really doesn't. It can be a one-day thing. It can be a short time period thing, or it could be a long-term commitment where maybe it's every week they just go for a couple hours. So your student can really choose what's best for them. You can think of things like service or mission trips, which of course are a big commitment, or maybe just spending the day volunteering at Special Olympics. It could be going weekly walking dogs at the local animal shelter. So you see how the time frame can really change based on what their desires are. So what I suggest here is have your student find something that interests them, that they're passionate about, and see how they could turn that into community service. We want this to be something that they enjoy because they will gain valuable experience through it, but the chances of them doing it are way higher if it's something that they're passionate about or interested in. Now, speaking of time commitments, if your student is taking a gap year, that could be a huge opportunity to really build up this service experience to make them more competitive for scholarships and for admissions. One idea would be maybe signing up for AmeriCorps, where a student really commits to serving. Now, the nice thing about this is actually they do provide a living allowance, sometimes a small stipend. They might give an education award to help pay for college or trade school. So they also have things like helping with student loans, student loan deferment, helping with interest. There's lots of different benefits here when it comes to volunteering with them. So that could be a bigger commitment, but it can really work to a student's advantage in so many different ways. So as you can see, community service, we've talked about a few different ways that it can actually help them find scholarships they're eligible for. We also spoke about how it can actually make their chances of winning the scholarship higher by making them more competitive. And then I gave you some ideas on how a student can get more involved. I think the last thing I want to say here is that a lot of families feel like their student has to be involved in everything under the sun. They have to have a million activities under their belt and tons of hours of service and a job and leadership and all of these things. And while that's great, what we really push in the scholarship system is being deeply involved in a few things versus surface level involvement in a lot of things. So try to keep that in mind when listening to this. Don't think that your student has to do all of the things that I've suggested here today. Have them pick one and go all in. Not only will it show a committee that they can commit, but it'll give them way more stories to tell for their essays. They'll actually truly get some sort of experience and stories and things that they can refer to in their applications out of it if they're truly deeply involved in one organization, again, versus say just showing up to 10 different organization's meetings. That's just not going to be nearly as beneficial as actually getting involved. Lastly, don't forget that I mentioned it can be something that's unofficial. It doesn't have to be with a fancy organization. It doesn't have to be flying out of the country in order to do this. It could be simply helping an elderly neighbor every weekend, going to get their groceries, and that could be something considered community service, or maybe walking their dog now that they're getting older. So it doesn't have to be something very fancy or formal or expensive. It doesn't have to cost any money either in order to make your students competitive. Okay, so having volunteer experience demonstrates that really your student is making giving back a priority, and that's something that committees do appreciate. It has the potential to lead to a lot of money for college, as well as so many other benefits, including acceptances and maybe even job opportunities, etc. So make sure that you look into whether or not your student is eligible for scholarships in this category. And don't forget that there are tons of other topics a student can apply to scholarships for, say interests, passions, future career plans, etc. So if you want to learn how to find those, make sure you click the link in the description for our free 6 steps to scholarships training. Also, make sure you hit subscribe again, because every single week I'm giving a new strategy to work towards that debt-free degree. All right, I'll see you in the next video.